Hi, my name's Rust. I'm a Soulsborne content creator with an emphasis on PvP. Elden Ring's meta has been pretty stale since the game first launched, and with the release of patch 1.10, one thing has risen above everything else, being the absolute dictator of the meta. Mashing out of hit stun multiple fucking times. Every single fucking time. Mashing. Always mashing. Hyper armor. Mashing out of hit stun. Hyper armor. Hyper armor. Mashing out of hit stun. Mashing. Mashing. So fucking mashing. Mashing out of hit stun. Every single time. Mashing. Every single fucking time. And because of this, fun and unique builds can often be very difficult to pull off just because of how oppressive it can be when you fight an opponent that simply doesn't give a shit and decides to attack you out of hit stun repeatedly. So, what do you do? Do you embrace the meta of PSGS, straight swords and spears, sword dancing like your life depends on it? Or do you be quirky and different and interesting? The sad truth is, if you try and use a fun and unique setup, then you'll likely get shit on as a tryhard metalord like me continues to ruin your fun with oppressive setups. But what if I told you that there was a setup that could counter this oppressive playstyle? In this video, I'm going to teach you about several different offhand weapon setups that fulfill a unique role in countering the masher mindset. At the end of the video will be a showcase where I'll demonstrate the concepts covered in the video. If you enjoy the video, be sure to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you found the information helpful at all, or if you're just more confused than ever. Different offhand weapons fulfill different roles depending on what main hand weapon that you're using and what you're fighting against. But to keep things simple, we're going to approach each option one at a time. But first, there's a reason why so many people just mash out a hit stun repeatedly. Every weapon, with the exception of daggers and thrusting swords, does a base amount of poise damage on the first move up their attack chain, and consecutive swings always deal roughly half the original amount of poise damage. This means that even something like a two-handed greatsword only does 132 poise damage on the second swing. So, a player that's running max poise will be able to tank the hit and freely attack back at you to force a trade. This doesn't apply the same way to power stance movesets, where, for example, straight swords can always break the maximum poise with every swing of its attack chain. Not only that, their attacks come out fast enough that even against someone using a hyper armor weapon, like a greatsword, won't be able to mash out a hit stun fast enough to punish the straight sword user. Katanas, as another example, don't have this property, where their power stance moveset comes out in staggered attacks. And with the second hit of the follow-up attack coming out at 23 frames, anyone can freely mash out a hit stun from these weapons and force the katana user onto the back foot. So what do you do, as a main hand katana user, to keep an opponent from mashing out a hit stun and forcing you to constantly play on the defensive? First, and one of my favorite options, is the Offhand Fist weapon, specifically Starfist or Castus. When using the offhand, these weapons have a faster attack speed than even something like a thrusting sword coming out at 13 frames, but with enough poise damage to consistently poise break. After landing the first hit with a katana, take a jab with a fist weapon, and then continue to cycle between R1 and L1 to your heart's content, or until the opponent finally figures out that they have to back the fuck up. But even if the opponent panic rolls away from the fist weapon, then the follow-up swing from the katana will still hit if they try and attack after their roll, since the attack with the fist weapon walks you forward enough to keep you in range of them. It's a hilariously oppressive setup that keeps opponents from being able to stubbornly muscle their way through your attacks. That is, at least, until they have hyper armor. Once hyper armor gets involved, then we have to take a step back and reevaluate our setup. Hyper armor starts at the 8th frame of their attack, which is just fast enough for an imposing greatsword user to mash their way out a hit stun between your attacks and force you back. The problem is that the stun duration dealt by your weapons is only considered a damage level 1 stun, meaning that it's the shortest stun duration. In order to keep someone with hyper armor from mashing out a hit stun, then you need to lead with something that does a damage level 2 stun. In this case, we'll be looking at using a main hand halberd alongside the Offhand Fist. After neutral attack with the halberd, the fist weapon will true combo, and you can delay your attack until the first frame that you can take a step and roll catch with the halberd. This makes it really difficult for even a competent player to play against this setup, where they have to be afraid of mashing out a hit stun, and they have to start timing their rolls perfectly to get away from the halberd without getting roll caught on the way out. As they start trying to play more carefully, you can start throwing them off by throwing out additional hits with the Offhand Fist to cause them to panic. The downside of the Offhand Fist is that it lacks range. It's shorter than a dagger, and if your attack falls short, then you're in deep shit. As an alternative, the Offhand Kiba is a really great option. The Off Kiba is only 1 frame slower on startup compared to the Fist, but with significantly more range. The Kiba works similarly to the fist weapon. If you start the attack chain with the Kiba, then you can delay your attack until you can take a single step and roll catch them on the way out with the halberd. The Kiba has a very dramatic attack animation that's easy to react to, whereas the Offhand Fist is very subtle and hard to distinguish. So even though the Offhand Kiba may be better on paper, you may still have better success with the Offhand Fist. So you've landed your first hit with the halberd and prevented the Hyper Armor Masher from mashing mindlessly out a hit stun by hitting them with the follow-up attack of your Offhand Fist or Off Kiba. From this point, you cannot lead back into the halberd hit fast enough to keep them from getting into their Hyper Armor frames. So instead, you'll be forced back after the offhand weapon connects. If you want more security and being able to chain these attacks together, then there's two options that I'd recommend for offhand weapons that can keep even the horniest Hyper Armor junkie at bay. To start with is the Offhand Greatsword. This one's particularly unique. Offhand Greatsword is the only weapon that retains its full amount of poise damage on every swing. So, after you stun them with the initial halberd hit, then you can swing with impunity with the Offhand Greatsword, and even the most brainless monkey masher won't be able to do a thing to stop it. After you connect the hit from the halberd, the opponent has to roll twice to get out of range of the curved greatsword, which lunges forward toward the opponent as you swing. If they don't know any better and only roll the first swing and try and get away, then they'll get hit by the second. The last offhand weapon setup that I'll mention is the Offhand Greatspear. This weapon has been bugged from the release of the game, and for whatever reason, when a Greatspear is used in the offhand, it gives the user Hyper Armor as if it was being two-handed. The Hyper Armor value is really immense, making it work well with small weapons like katanas and daggers in the main hand. If you're fighting against a small fast weapon like a Shamshir, then you can stun them first with the katana R1 and then follow it up with the Offhand Greatspear. It'll force a trade, but since you get Hyper Armor from the attack, the opposing Shamshir user will be put in hit stun and you'll be free to attack again. However, if the opponent is also using a Hyper Armor weapon, then neither player will be stunned as you lead into the Offhand Greatspear attack. But if they try and roll away after initially being stunned by the katana R1, then the Greatspear will roll catch as they try and get away. At the end of the day, there's no stopping someone from using some brain-dead Ash of War like Endure or Storm Assault that gives them frame 1 Hyper Armor. Against players that use these, you'll have to work very hard to outplay them. But if someone wants to endure in your face, then there's really nothing you can do to stop them. But hopefully, these give you some fun ideas about how you can adapt and deal with brain-dead monkey mashing that came as a result with the changes to the meta. From this point in the video will be a showcase where I'll be demonstrating the concepts covered in the video. Be sure to like and subscribe, and let's get into the fights. Starting off, I'll be showcasing Offhand Fist setups. I really like the katana paired with the Offhand Fist, primarily because of the versatile moveset and range of the katana. We start off pretty aggressively and land the first hit, followed up with continued aggression as they roll in. Now that I'm swinging, as long as they stay within my range, I'll always have priority. They attack out of the roll and we trade, but my off fist has a faster swing speed, so I can prevent them from attacking out of hit stun. They swap over to Endure Raptor Talons and proceed to use macro spacing. They then walk straight at me and attack, but I don't really care to outplay at this point, so I just end the fight. My next opponent is running the Qatar, which this setup does fairly well against. I try and space out the running attack, but take a trade, and continue to press while I still have the advantage out of hit stun. They go for another running attack, but my timing is better this time and prevent their attempt to mash out a hit stun with the off fist. One of the weaknesses of the off fist is that if they roll to your right, then the tracking is pretty bad after the R1 and your character won't turn far enough to land the hit. Again, they go for an empty jump into the running attack, and I stop it short with a katana and continue to cycle R1 L1 to prevent them from mashing out a hit stun to end the fight. Next up, my opponent is using a parry shield, so I quickly make the adaptation and swap over to my main hand whip to avoid getting exposed on Reddit. Whip synergizes very well with the Offhand Fist. During the whip, people will tend to often roll in, and the Offhand Fist will roll catch as they exit their roll. Similar to the halberd, the Offhand Fist true combos from the whip. Attack out a hit stun here for two reasons. The Offhand Fist will come out faster than the halberd if they go for a roll catch, and if they go for a second R1, I'll poise the hit. But they take option 3 and jump over my head. Who would have guessed? Next up, I'm running halberd with the Offhand Fist. We start off the fight by preventing my opponent from doing anything as they keep trying for the L2. Since they keep rolling in close to me, I have no reason not to continue to press my advantage. After I whip the off fist swing, I back off, since I've now lost my advantage. Roll their hits, and punish the L2 with a Frostpot. TSGS has a really rough time against this matchup. As long as they're within the range of the off fist, then they can't roll the hit from the halberd and be able to safely go for a rolling attack without being stopped by the fist. Plus, they have limited options of breaking neutral, and I can very easily whiff punish anything that they go for with the halberd. I catch him with the halberd and land the follow-up hit to prevent their R1, and begin my R1 L1 cycle, roll catch them on the way out, and end the fight with the R1 as they empty jump. This was a really good fight to find, as my opponent is also running a pretty unique setup with the Shamshir off lance. It's a very good setup that gives him hyper armor on both the off lance and the sword dance from the Shamshir. With this setup, he can make the choice of whether he wants to go with the off lance hit for a low risk hyper armor, or if they're facing opposing hyper armor, then they can use sword dance to poise break an opposing hyper armor weapon if they mash out a hit stun. At a point, they go for the offlance and whiff, and I space out to roll catch with a halberd, predicting the forward roll. Follow up with the fist for a true combo, and miss with the halberd, but go for another off fist, and then I escape, expecting them to go for a hyper armor option. As they whiff the running attack, my input drops on my R1, and I misclick a backstep. They sword dance out of hit stun, and since the fist only does a damage level 1 stun, the sword dance goes off and trades with my halberd, and bait out another sword dance, but I'm too slow to punish it. We reset to neutral, and I'm looking for an opportunity. They panic roll forward, and I go for the trade with the halberd to finish the fight. Next, I'll be using the Offhand Kiba alongside the halberd. As the fight starts off, I fail to space their jumping attack, and I play it patient and land a hit, avoiding their crouch attack. Follow up with the Offhand Kiba, which whiffs, and they walk into the halberd. Now they keep rolling toward me, so I just continue to cycle my attacks, since I'll always have the priority as long as they continue to be forced to roll the hit. Reset for a second, and quickly go right back to the vortex as they continue to roll forward into my attacks. Again, I have no reason to do anything other than cycle my R1 L1 until they make a play to use spacing. For this next fight, I have a pretty high latency to my opponent, and they seem to be pretty committed to getting the poison off at the start of the fight, giving me an opportunity to work with. I land a hit and back off, fearing the potential Morgott Ash of War, not realizing that they can't actually go for it because of their Serpent Shield. I roll the Greatsword and close back in to punish the Ash of War, and they start rolling in, much like my previous opponent, with the R1 L1 chain. As long as they stay close to me, I will always have priority, so they eat several hits and go down without much of a fuss. But now we'll take a look at the offhand curve Greatsword. I start off this fight with misjudging the distance of the running L1 and eat a bunch of damage for no reason. But from here, I'm able to get better positioning after they whiff their crouching L1 and start a chain with the offhand CGS. That catches them on the third swing because Curve Greatsword is silly like that. I space and punish their running R1 and go straight back to the same old thing, landing the second swing of the CGS and ending the fight with a running attack. Next up will be the off-lance setup. Again, the main perk of the off-lance is the hyper armor that you get anytime that you attack with it. Starting this fight off, I'm spacing pretty far out since I don't know how this person plays. Instead, they just walk up to me, so I punish them for walking into my space with an R1. I try to roll catch unsuccessfully with Unsheathed. From their back, they're pressured to panic roll, fearing the backstab. But I go for the charge R2 to roll catch instead, and get a bleed proc, and end the fight with the off-lance hit. Now, main hand dagger is actually incredibly strong, especially with its particular setup with the Reduvia off-lance. This fight starts off as I attempt to whiff punish, but miss the hit by a hair, and try for a backstab expecting them to roll past. They roll the dagger, and I roll catch with the off-lance for a bleed proc, and end the fight with the Reduvia L2 as a roll catch. For the last fight, we once again have dagger off-lance, and this fight starts off as I land the running R2, and follow it up with the off-lance hit as they mash out a hit stun. Land a bleed proc, and space out expecting them to mash again. I try to trade with the off-lance, but they play their spacing well and punish the attack. I roll the jump attack, and land with the running attack to finish the fight. There's a lot of unique weapon setups that actually work really well with how this meta is developed. Try out some of these options and see what works for you. If you find something cool and unique that works well for you, then tell me about it in the comments. I'd love to hear what you come up with. But that's going to do it for this video. Catch you in the next one.